The Hyundai i30 hatchback used to be one of Australia's best priced and best value cars, but these days the prices are way up. That's because the brand has just had to switch its sourcing from South Korea to Europe. And that means, yes, the asking price is a lot higher for this car. They've scrapped all the base models and there's just the N-line version. So is it still worth your money? In this review, I'll tell you all about it and tell you about the new engine that's offered here as well. So if you haven't already, please like, subscribe and ring the bell, and let's get to it. This updated i30 range has seen some changes, like the entry-level grade is gone, and so is the one above that, and so is the one above that. And what that means is that the cost of entry into the i30 hatchback range is now significantly higher than before. The entry-level version is called the i30 N-Line, and it costs $36,000 before on-road costs, and that is a lot of money. Sure, you're getting a lot of spec for that cash. You're getting things like 18-inch alloy wheels, LED headlights and daytime running lights, the sporty look N-Line package on the outside, some really nice interior trim as well, a pair of big screens, including a digital instrument cluster and a 10-inch touchscreen media system with Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but it's plug-in Apple CarPlay, not wireless. And there's also a bunch of other really nice features. But if you want a bit more for your money, you'll have to spend a bit more money to get it. To get into this one, which is the N-Line Premium, it adds extra features like a big panoramic glass roof, you get heated front seats, a heated steering wheel, and that high-spec version also gets electric seat adjustment for the driver with 12-way adjustment, so yeah, that's pretty impressive. Plus, it's got memory settings as well, and you also get BlueLink connected services if you do decide to go for the high-grade version. That means that you've got an emergency call button, and it'll notify people if you are in an accident. You can also keep an eye on the car using your phone. Look, $41,000 for this version seems kind of pricey. In fact, it's expensive, I have to say it, but I've got some good alternatives that you might want to consider. Let's talk about them now. Okay, if you're thinking about a little hatchback, there are some great options out there that you might want to consider. Firstly, one that I always recommend to people who are looking for a hatchback and don't need a huge boot or huge back seat, the Toyota Corolla. It's available as a hybrid only, and it has a heap of different variants available. It's super duper real world efficient, it's fun to drive, and the ZR version is still around 40 grand as a hybrid with some really great features. I like that car a lot. I like the way it drives, and I think it could be a fantastic option if you're not sure whether this one is right for you. And another car you might want to check out, well, quickly, is the Kia Cerato. It's about to finish up in Australia, replaced by a new model, but the existing versions, especially the GT model at 36 grand, does make a lot of sense. It has a 1.6 turbo petrol version and also a couple of, well, boring 2 litres, but I think that the Cerato range in run out does make a lot of sense. If you can find one in stock that's cheap, you'll be happy with it because it's a very nice car to drive, especially that GT, like I said. And finally, one from a different part of the world, well, actually a similar part of the world to this, the Skoda Scala. Yes, it's made in Czechia, so the Czech Republic as it's formerly known, like this car, and it does have a beautiful driving dynamic to it. It's excellent value for the base model car. It's, yeah, really impressive value, in fact. Lots of space on the inside, a big boot, and plenty of lovely features as well. And if you want it, there's a sporty version called Monte Carlo. Costs about the same as this on the road, and I think it stacks up really well. Plus it gets 7 years of warranty too. So which would you pick? Let me know in the comments. It kind of looks just like a Hyundai i30 N hatch, doesn't it? And that's the point here. It's an N-line, so it has the sporty look. It might not necessarily be as sporty to drive, but it does have some sporty tires. This one's got 18-inch wheels, and they are Michelin Pilot Sport tires. They are a very good tire, and it makes this car drive better than you might expect, but we'll get to that in a sec. Now, same size as before, about 4.3 meters in length, so a very city-friendly size. And at the back, there is some design change as well. You've got different tail lights, you've got the lower diffuser with the twin pipes, and let's have a look in the boot and see what we're dealing with here. Yes, you bet, we do have a pretty decent sized boot. You can see for yourself that it does look large, and there's enough space in there for luggage, prams and so forth. And there's also some pretty good practicality. You've got 12-volt port, shopping bag hook, a light under there, a little storage caddy on that side, and on this side you do have another little storage caddy, another shopping bag hook up there, and underneath the boot floor, this is the big story, people, tyre repair kit. Yeah, because under there is the battery pack for the hybrid system. So yes, it means no spare wheel. Yes, that could rule it out for you. I would totally understand, but tell me what you think about it in the comments, and let's check out the inside, shall we? All right, so this is your point of view perspective of my legs. No, sorry, the i30 hatchback. And look, it does still feel pretty conventional in terms of the design. Not necessarily too different from the models that came before it, but it does have a bit more wow factor thanks to the fact that this is an N-line model. So you do have the red stitching on the steering wheel, for instance, and also the little N badge down there, but also these seats with beautiful N embroidery and this lovely red stitching, and also this red finish in the seats, which actually looks fantastic. Now these are the more premium seats because this is the premium version. That means you've got heating for the seats as well. There's also a heated steering wheel, but no ventilation for the seats. Now, it also comes with a sat-nav system built in. So let's jump into that right now. It does have a pretty easy to use screen system. These buttons down below, well, they're not buttons, they're sort of haptic controls, so they can take a little bit of getting used to, but the touchscreen itself, it's okay, I would say. I never really use sat-nav. I usually use Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, but this one doesn't have wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. You still have to plug in, and that means that, well, I forgot my plug, so I'm just having to rely on old-fashioned Bluetooth. Yuck. Now, down here is where you will plug in your phone. You've got USB-C and USB-A and a wireless phone charger there as well. And it's a pretty decent little space down there. The conventional shifter, I like that. It does have a manual mode if you want to put it into manual mode, but you've also got paddles up on the steering wheel here if you want to take control. You've also got cup holders, a little storage tray here, electronic park brake, not a manual one, and also in here you'll find a decent sized, well, reasonably sized console with a 12-volt port. There's bottle holders in the doors as well, and yes, you do get a digital instrument cluster too. It does have a fair few menus available on it. You can jump through those menus and see what you need to see, trip computer, that sort of info, all that is there, and there's a digital speedo there as well. You don't get a head-up display, which might be a bit disappointing for some, but thankfully you do get easy to control steering wheel buttons like that. Oh, and also I forgot to mention, you've got actual buttons for your climate control too, and knobs and dials and all of that. That's a big thumbs up. I like that a lot. But overall, I think this interior does feel, well, kind of special. Not necessarily as special as the price tag maybe suggests it should. But remember, this version also gets the big sunroof as well, the big glass roof, which does open. And I have a little bit of an issue with this control system. A lot of other vehicles have two sliders, so you can slide the shade back or slide the glass back, whatever you want to do separately. Whereas this one, it's one button, and you'll find that sometimes when you don't want it to, the shade will come forward. Like, I don't, look, why would I want the bloody sunroof open a little bit, but the shade closing? That's really silly. Anyway, it's one thing that I don't like about the interior. Up there is your SOS button in case you need to call for help if you have a crash or something. There's a sunglasses holder. You get flip down visors with mirrors, thankfully, but there's a little separate light switch. It's not one of those ones with the integrated light into it, and an auto dimming rear vision mirror as well. So I think that it's okay, but let's check out the back seat space. The back seat is not very comfortable. So my knees are hard up against the seat in front for someone in my driving position. I'm 182 centimeters, 6 foot. My toes, well, pretty tight under there as well. And headroom, yeah. If you're sitting up straight, you're sort of almost brushing the ceiling if you're as tall as I am. You do get that nice big glass roof, as I said, but still not very roomy in the back here. Thankfully though, you do get a pair of directional air vents and a pair of USB-C ports. There are map pockets on both seats and these hard back plates on the seat backs, and as you can see, my daughter made use of most of that. And there's also a couple of bottle holders in the doors. You've got ISOFIX points, as you would expect. Nice sort of trim finishing back here as well, and a flip down armrest with cup holders too. So I think it's going to be okay for a small family, but if you've got big kids, it might not be very comfy. So yeah. Also, I just want to call out, these elbow pads are soft, which is a plus, and some other cars don't have soft elbow pads on the doors at this kind of money. Also, you get these grab handles for when mum or dad is having a bit of a thrash, and little lights as well. So yeah, space not great, amenities pretty good. Under the bonnet of the updated i30 range is a high-tech petrol powertrain. So it's a 1.5 litre 4-cylinder turbo petrol engine combined to a 48-volt mild hybrid system. Yes, there's an electric motor. Yes, there's a battery pack. All of that stuff, which you might think is a bit complicated. And it does help give this car a little bit more grunt in some situations, and also helps it save fuel. So we'll get to that later on, but let's talk about power and torque. You'll see the numbers on your screen now. That's okay, but not necessarily a benchmark setter. And it comes as standard with a 7-speed dual clutch automatic transmission, and it's front wheel drive. It can tow just a little bit. You'll see the numbers on your screen now, but this car, well, it's all about what it's like to drive in the urban area and on the open road. So let's go do that, shall we? And we'll talk about fuel use soon too. So before we go for a drive, it does have the annoying bing bong technology, which tells you what the speed sign is in your area. So there is a preset that you can do. So you can use the star button on the steering wheel, and then it'll come up here where you can turn off the speed limit warning, which is the bing bong, and put it onto speed limit information if you just want to be sort of shown what the speed limit is, or you can turn it off completely, but you do have to do it every time you drive the car. And there is no shortcut like in the other models in the Hyundai range that have seen a shortcut roll out where you just hold on the mute button. Not yet. Hopefully that comes, but let's go for a drive, shall we? Put the phone away and let's start up and roll. Now, before we go too far, I want to say that this car will constantly default back to eco mode. Maybe there's a way you can change that in the settings, but I haven't figured it out. It will default back into eco mode, and eco mode is not the greatest mode for this car because it dulls everything down a little bit to make it more eco, right? So there is a drive mode selector. Obviously, you can just hit the button down there and put it into normal or sport. I've put it into normal right now, and it's still, I mean, it's not amazing, this powertrain, I have to say. It feels a bit dull and a bit doughy when you are just tooling around town. If you're just doing low speed driving, the dual clutch automatic transmission and the mild hybrid system and that turbocharged engine all combine to give you some lag and some frustration at times. I'm just not convinced that it's the best execution of this type of technology that I've experienced, and I've driven a few 48-volt mild hybrids. I've driven lots of downsized turbos with dual clutch engines, and this isn't the best. It's not the worst, but it's not the best. And I mean, if you hit that button and go into sport mode, yeah, I mean, it's better, but if you want to drive in sport mode all the time, you'll be paying the price when it comes to the fuel economy. And yeah, I mean, it's marginally about fuel economy, this car, isn't it, being a mild hybrid, but I don't think that it's necessarily a sporty, fun, fast car to drive, despite the fact that it's got the N-line badging on it. And maybe if you are after that, you should spend a little more and get into the N hatch, because it is properly silly, properly fun, and an absolute hoot to drive, but a very different type of car to this, obviously. So yeah, you can see there it was a little bit laggy to get away, even in sport mode. And in eco, I'll put it back into normal because that's the mode I've been driving in most of the time. It's just something you want to keep in mind, I think. But the other thing about it is that this engine and transmission will at times go into a coasting mode. So you'll see the revs drop to 0 and a little readout on the screen says coasting mode when you take your foot off the accelerator and the car doesn't need to use the gears or the engine. It'll just go into a coasting mode to try and save a bit of fuel. And you've also got regenerative braking as part of this car in order to try and feed back a bit of potentially lost energy to the battery pack. Now, what I'll say about the brake pedal responsiveness is that it's pretty good. Lots of other regen braking systems tend to have a bit more of a, I guess, flimsy feel or maybe an airy feel at the top of the pedal. You don't really have the same sort of sure-footed responsiveness that you might want from the brake pedal, but in this car, I'm actually finding it to be quite bitey, and I like that about it. I like that it doesn't feel too weird to drive, apart from maybe the engine and transmission being a bit strange at times. Oh, just calm down, champ. There's no need for that. That's one other thing you will notice. It will spin those front tyres a little bit more than you might expect. I mean, 250 Newton meters through the front tyres, and they're good tyres. Hate to see what it would be like with a set of rubbish cheap tyres on it. More generally though, it is an N-line, so it does have a bit more of a dynamic feel to it than some other cars in this class, that's for sure. I mean, you do have a firm ride. I don't think that it's uncomfortable, but it is perhaps a little bit more rigid feeling than some other cars in this segment. And if you are after a more cushiony car, then well, you might need to shop elsewhere, because you do sort of tend to feel a lot of the road surface below you in this car. And it does have sportier steering than some other cars. It's quite a direct, responsive steering feel. It's not necessarily overly joyful to drive, I don't think, but I don't think it's the worst in the class by any stretch either. I mean, maybe I'm feeling like I'm being a little bit harsh on this car, because it does have a pretty nice driving dynamic to it. It's sort of to my tastes, but it might not be to your tastes. It's just not as squishy or cushy or light and easy as some of those other vehicles in this segment. But there's also the fact that on coarse chip surfaces like this one, I'm only going less than 50 k's an hour, lots of road noise. When you do double that or more, 110 k's an hour on a freeway with rough surfacing, it's bloody loud in here. And that's one thing that might stop me from buying this car, because it can get on my nerves. It might get on your nerves too. But hey, let's talk about efficiency. Maybe there's some gains to be made when it comes to this car in that regard. Okay, let's talk fuel consumption. On your screen, you'll see the official combined cycle fuel consumption figure for the mild hybrid versions of the i30 hatch. And look, if you can achieve that sort of number, I think you'll be pretty happy with things. But over my testing, which isn't a full week of testing, but it is still the same sort of stuff I do with every car I drive, a bit of open road, a bit of urban testing, and the daily drop off to daycare, that sort of thing. And I think that the number I've seen, more than 7 litres per 100 k's, is not really good enough to justify it. Because, I mean, this car isn't sporty enough for you to go, yeah, it's a sporty turbo car, I'm going to buy it. And it's not efficient enough, in my experience, for you to go, oh, it's a super efficient mild hybrid turbo car and I'm going to buy it. So I'm left a little bit cold in terms of the overall impression of why you would buy this car compared to some of the other rivals, or even the i30N hatch. But hey, there are some other things you want to keep in mind about the fuel use stuff. So it will run on 91 RON regular unleaded, and even E10 if you want to. I wouldn't recommend using E10 in a turbo petrol engine personally, but it also has a pretty decent fuel tank capacity, so you should be able to do pretty long distances on a single tank. But hey, maybe it'll be heaps better on a freeway trip where you just spend hours and hours on the open road, but as far as I've seen, it's not overly impressive on the fuel consumption front. The updated version of the i30 still has the 5-star ANCAP safety rating from before, but it expires at the end of 2024. So that's something to keep in mind. But this actually has a bit more safety tech than the previous models. But standard is adaptive cruise control with a lane keeping system and traffic jam assist. There's also autonomous emergency braking with pedestrian and cyclist detection. You've got blind spot monitoring and rear cross traffic alert, parking sensors and a reversing camera, and there's a speed sign recognition system, which I mentioned in the driving section. Don't like that. Can't mute it yet either. Hopefully you can at some point in the future. And there's some other stuff that's been added, things like a rear occupant alert, so it'll tell you to check the back seats and make sure there's no one still there, and a fatigue system for the driver as well, so it'll basically monitor your interactions with the car, but it's not a camera system, thankfully. And when it comes to airbags, there are 7: dual front, front side, driver's knee, and full-length curtain coverage. Hyundai offers a 5-year unlimited kilometre warranty for this car and all the other cars in its range. Plus there's also a battery pack warranty for its hybrid vehicles like this one. You'll see the figures on your screen now for that. And you also need to keep in mind that yes, it does have, well, okay service intervals. 12 months, 10,000 Ks, which is a little bit more needy than the existing petrol versions, which were 12 months and 15,000 Ks. But the servicing is covered for life. So there's a cap price servicing calculator. You can go on to the Hyundai website and see how much this car will cost you at the 180,000 K service if you want to. So that's pretty handy, I reckon. And also, if you do service with Hyundai, they'll renew your roadside assistance every time too, up to a certain number of years, I think. But even so, it does seem to add some value to the ownership equation. The updated Hyundai i30 is definitely a good car, there's no doubt about it, but it is too expensive in my opinion. $41,000 for this spec. Sure, it feels pretty nice on the inside and it drives pretty well as well, but I mean, you just have to look around and see what else you can get for that kind of money to realize that it doesn't necessarily make as much sense as it could, or as it did in the past at least. Tell me what you think about it in the comments section below. Would you still go for an i30? I'd love to hear your thoughts, and if you haven't already, please like, subscribe and ring the bell, and I'll see you in the next one.